All right, let's dive into minimalist money management, especially for those of you interested in the lean startup world. We're going to be working with excerpts from a book called Minimalist Money, The Lean Startup's Path to Financial Freedom.
It's all about setting yourself up for financial success right from the start, which is, so important in the startup world.
For sure. So minimalist money management, or MMM, it basically flips the traditional profit equation on its head, right?
It does. Instead of the classic sales expenses per profit, we go sales profit expenses, baking profitability into the model from the get-go.
Love it.
Yeah.
So how do we actually do this? Where do we begin?
Well, the first step is to really define those financial goals. What are those revenue targets? What does success look like to you? Think about ideal profit margins and how you picture your business growing. Clear goals, they really act as a roadmap for your financial journey.
Okay, got it. Setting those goals. Then what?
Then we analyze your current financial situation. So you need a clear picture of your income sources, your expenses, both fixed and variable, and your current profit margins. This analysis helps you see where you're starting from and really what needs to change to achieve those goals.
So it's like taking a financial snapshot, seeing where you're at right now.
Precisely. And then this is where the real magic of MMM kicks in. Separate bank accounts.
Wait, hold on. Multiple bank accounts. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's all about giving every single dollar a job. You'll have one for revenue. All your income flows into that one initially. Then a profit account. A chunk of each sale goes directly into that one.
I like it. Profit's a priority. Where does the rest of the money go?
An account dedicated to those operating expenses. That covers your day-to-day operations. And finally, an account for the owner's compensation.
Okay. So the owner, the entrepreneur, gets paid separately for the business profits. That makes sense.
It creates that clear boundary between your personal finances and the business's finances.
All right, starting to see the bigger picture here. Clear goals, financial snapshot, and then we're strategically allocating our revenue.
Yeah.
But how do we determine like the percentage that goes into each account? Is there like a magic formula or something?
It really depends on those goals we talked about. But a common starting point is the 50-30-20 rule.
Okay, break that down for me. How does that fit into the MMM model?
So 50% to your operating expenses, 30% to the owner's compensation, and 20% straight to profit. Think of those as guidelines, though. The key is, analyzing your needs and adjusting those percentages to suit your specific situation.
Okay, so it's not one size fits all. It's more about customization.
Exactly. And just as important as setting it up initially is revisiting it regularly. Your business will change, your goals might shift, and the market, it's always throwing curveballs.
That's a really good point. So how often should we be kind of checking in on the system, maybe making tweaks and adjustments?
I would say at least every quarter. But monthly check-ins are even better, especially early on when things are moving quickly. And during these reviews, you're analyzing your account balances, seeing how you're progressing towards those goals, and then fine-tuning as needed.
So MMM is about being proactive and adaptable, not just crunching numbers, but making smart choices based on what those numbers are telling you.
That's exactly it. It's about giving you control and empowering you to reach your potential.
I like that, taking control. Now, once our MMM system's in place and revenue is flowing nicely into those accounts, how do we ensure we're being smart about our spending and maximizing those profits?
Well, that's where the concept of value versus cost comes in.
Oh, okay, now you got my attention. What's value versus cost?
Essentially, every expense, every investment, we need to evaluate it based on the value it's providing, not just its price tag.
So it's not about being cheap. It's about being strategic with your spending.
Precisely. It's about asking yourself, is this expense truly essential? Is it contributing to my overall value proposition? Am I really getting the most bang for my buck?
All right. So how do we actually go about doing this value versus cost thing? Is there a specific process?
First, identify your major expenses. Look through your budget, list everything out. Don't just stop at the numbers, though. Try to understand why each expense exists. What purpose does it serve? Okay,
so it's like a financial audit where we're really scrutinizing every item.
Absolutely. And then the next step is to really assess the value of each expense. This is where it gets a little more nuanced. You're looking at more than just the monetary return. Consider how does this expense contribute to your overall business strategy, your brand image, customer satisfaction, even team morale.
So it's about taking a holistic view, not just the financial bottom line.
Right. Like, for example, investing in employee training. It might not have an immediate financial return, but it could lead to, a more skilled and motivated team, which ultimately benefits your business in the long run.
Right, right. Okay, so once we've kind of assessed the value, then what? How do we decide whether to keep an expense, cut it, or maybe make some adjustments?
This is where you compare that value that you just identified to the actual cost of the expense. If the value clearly outweighs the cost, then you're good. But if the cost is higher, or if there's a way to achieve the same outcome more efficiently, then it's time to consider making some changes.
Finding that balance between value and cost. But cutting costs can be, well, it can be kind of scary, especially for startups who are already working with limited funds. Are there ways to reduce expenses without compromising on quality?
Absolutely. And maintaining that quality is essential. In fact, sometimes you can find ways to cut costs while actually improving quality at the same time.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more. Give me some examples.
One thing you can do is embrace lean operations. Look for areas in your processes where you can streamline things, eliminate any redundancies, and just reduce waste.
Working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And technology is your friend here. There's so many affordable tools out there that can help you automate tasks, improve communication, and just streamline your workflow.
Right, like those accounting platforms we've talked about before.
Right. Automation saves you time, reduces errors, and it frees up your team to focus on, the more strategic, high-value tasks.
Makes sense. What are some other smart cost-cutting moves?
Don't be afraid to negotiate.
Yeah.
Talk to your suppliers. You might be surprised by the discounts you can get, especially if you're upfront about your startup situation.
Building those relationships, being open.
Exactly. And another key strategy, and this is really at the heart of the lean startup methodology, is customer feedback.
So engaging your customers, getting their input, how does that help with cutting costs?
Customer feedback is invaluable. It can help you identify any features or services that aren't really adding value, which, could be unnecessarily driving up your costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's about really making sure your offerings are aligned with what your customers actually value.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about product development. How can we make sure we're creating products that are not only innovative, but also profitable?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
Yeah.
How does MMM help with that?
Well, the first thing is to really design your products and services with profitability in mind right from the start. So that means thinking about your costs, your target market, your pricing strategy, even those profit margins.
So it's not an afterthought. It's like baked into the DNA of the product from day one.
Right. And another key strategy here is to really embrace lean market research. Don't just assume what your customers want. Talk to them, do surveys, experiment, really test those ideas.
So it's about validating those assumptions before investing a ton of time and money.
Exactly. And a big part of this is that idea of the minimum viable product, the MVP.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It's all about releasing a basic version first to get feedback, and then you iterate from there.
Right. An MVP allows you to test your product concept with minimal investment, and you gather valuable data from your target market. This data informs your product development decisions.
So it's about finding that product market fit as efficiently as possible. Any real world examples of how this approach has led to success?
Well, there was this software startup that really focused on this niche market, and they were creating this specialized tool. But instead of building this super complex platform right away, they decided to just focus on the bare bones.
I bet that saved them a lot of time and money.
It did. They were able to launch quickly and really get that product into the hands of users. And then through that early feedback and testing, they realized there was this crucial feature that users really wanted, and they were willing to pay a premium for it.
So they were able to kind of adapt and improve their product based on actual user insights.
Exactly. And by focusing on those features that deliver the most value, they could justify a higher price, which ultimately boosted their profitability.
Brilliant. It just goes to show that even a small feature, if it really addresses a pain point for the user, can have a huge impact on your bottom line. And speaking of bottom line, let's talk about revenue streams.
Of course. In the lean startup world, identifying and developing multiple revenue streams is really important.
It's about diversifying your income. not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. So you start by analyzing those current offerings. Can you create different pricing tiers? Can you offer add-ons? Could you bundle products together?
Good starting points.
Yeah.
What about thinking outside of our existing product?
Absolutely. Explore partnerships, sponsorships, maybe even affiliate marketing. Think about licensing your intellectual property or even selling, data insights if that aligns with your model.
So thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Are there any startups that come to mind who have done this well?
Well, there was this one startup. They started by selling, individual products online.
Okay. Pretty standard e-commerce model.
Yeah. But they noticed that a lot of their customers were repeat buyers, buying similar items on a pretty regular basis, and that gave them an idea.
What was it?
A subscription box service.
I love those. It's like a little present every month.
Right. And so they started curating these boxes with selections of their products, and it really took off. It gave them this steady recurring income, and it also really helped them, build those stronger customer relationships.
Yes, taking that one-time purchase and turning it into an ongoing relationship.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've identified our revenue streams. The next step is figuring out our pricing strategy.
Right. And effective pricing is so important, for profitability, but it can be one of the most difficult things to get right.
For sure. There's so much to think about, like your costs, your target market, the competition. Where do you even begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is understanding those costs. You need to know exactly how much it costs to produce your product or to deliver your service.
Right, because you need to make sure you're pricing high enough to cover your cost and actually turn a profit.
Exactly. But it's not just about covering your costs. It's also about knowing your target market. Who are your ideal customers? What do they value? What are they willing to pay?
So market research plays a big role here as well.
It does. Things like surveys, customer interviews, even analyzing your competitors.
Okay, once we've got a good handle on costs and target market, what are some specific pricing techniques that work well for lean startups?
Value-based pricing is a really effective technique, and that's where you're really focusing on the value that you deliver, not just on your costs or what the competition is doing.
So it's about communicating the benefits and solutions. How do you actually do that? Communicate that value.
It all comes down to your marketing. You need to really clearly articulate how your product solves a problem or improves their lives.
Right. Telling that story.
Yeah.
Okay, what about other pricing techniques?
Well, dynamic pricing can be really effective. And this is where you're adjusting prices in real time based on, demand or competition.
So being flexible, responding to market changes.
Right. And then there's also psychological pricing. And this is all about those little tactics that can influence customer perception.
Interesting. Like what? Give me an example.
Well, one classic technique is charm pricing. And this is where you set the price just below a whole number, like $99.99 instead of $100. It feels more appealing.
That's clever. It plays on how we perceive value. Any other psychological tricks?
And another one is decoy pricing. This is where you offer 3 product tiers, but the middle one is strategically priced to make it seem like the best deal.
So you're kind of nudging people towards a particular option.
Exactly. And then don't forget A/B testing. This is where you actually experiment with different price points and see what performs best.
So it's a data-driven approach.
Yeah.
Not just relying on your gut feeling.
Exactly. Now, all this talk about pricing and revenue, it really underscores the importance of financial discipline. How can founders instill that, not just for themselves, but for their entire team? It's really about building a culture of financial awareness and responsibility, where everyone from the CEO to the interns, they all understand the importance of financial efficiency.
Okay, so it's not just about the numbers; it's about the overall mindset.
Right, and one of the key things here is transparency.
Transparency, you mean in terms of the company's financial information?
Exactly. When everyone can see the financial goals, the challenges, the progress, it really creates a sense of ownership.
So everyone's kind of in it together.
Yeah.
Sharing that burden.
Exactly. And it's important to communicate regularly as well, whether that's through meetings, reports, even just informal updates.
Keeping everyone in the loop.
Exactly. And, don't forget to celebrate those wins, even the small ones.
Oh, definitely celebrate. How does celebrating tie into this idea of a lean financial culture?
Well, it shows people that that their financial discipline, their smart choices are actually paying off. It reinforces that financial prudence is not about limitations. It's about building a solid foundation for achieving those big goals.
Love it. Okay, let's talk scaling, taking a startup and growing it.
Scaling a startup presents some unique challenges. It's all about finding that balance between managing growth while also maintaining financial discipline.
Right. Because the instinct is to overspend when you're seeing all that growth and momentum. So how does MMM help with responsible scaling?
Well, one of the key principles is to adopt a phased approach. So instead of trying to do everything all at once, prioritize your growth initiatives. Focus on the ones that are going to deliver the most immediate impact.
Strategic expansion,
Yeah.
not just growth for the sake of growth.
Exactly. And as you grow, it's really important to try to maintain financial simplicity.
Okay, that sounds counterintuitive. Why keep things simple when they're getting more complex?
Because as things get more complex, it's easy to get bogged down in complicated systems.
Like complexity often leads to inefficiencies.
Exactly. So, things like cloud-based accounting software, those can handle that increased complexity, but they can also give you clear, easy to understand reports.
Okay. Leveraging technology to maintain clarity. What are some other tips for scaling with minimalist finances?
Well, always focus on your core strengths. What are you truly exceptional at?
What sets you apart from the competition?
Exactly. By focusing on your strength, you avoid spreading yourself too thin.
Right.
So, for example, there was this tech company, and they had this really innovative software solution, but instead of trying to do too much, they stayed focused on their core product.
Right.
They invested in refining their software, addressing customer feedback, really, really improving the functionality.
So they doubled down on what they did best.
Exactly. And it paid off. They became the leader in their niche, and their profits really took off,
Right.
all while maintaining a really lean operation.
That's a great example of responsible scaling.
Mhm.
And speaking of responsibility, let's not forget about those customers.
Right. Keeping those customers happy is so, so important.
Absolutely. How does MMM factor in with customer retention?
Well, MMM encourages you to think of customer retention as an investment, not as an expense. It's generally much more cost-effective to retain a current customer than to acquire a new one.
For sure.
Right. So MMM encourages you to allocate those resources to things that really enhance customer satisfaction, build loyalty, and reduce churn.
Wise investments. Now, as your startup scales, maintaining that lean financial culture, it becomes even more critical.
It does, because as the team grows, as the operations get more complex, it's easy to start losing sight of those core principles.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose track of the bigger picture.
Exactly. So as the founder, you need to really make sure that you're constantly communicating that importance, celebrating those wins, really encouraging everyone to think about the financial implications of every decision.
Right. It's like building that culture of financial awareness from the inside out.
Exactly. Now let's talk about another big challenge that startups face, especially in today's world.
Okay. What's that?
Future-proofing your business.
Yeah, big one. It seems like the world is changing so fast these days. How can startups prepare for what's next?
Well, I think the first step is really accepting that change is inevitable. It's about building that adaptability, that flexibility, that commitment to continuous learning.
So it's not just about business growth. It's about that mindset, that willingness to grow and learn.
Right. And a big part of that is staying up to date, stay informed about what's going on in the market, what new technologies are emerging.
So keeping your finger on the pulse of the business world.
Exactly. And it's not just about awareness. It's about actively adapting your business model to respond to those changes.
Because what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. What are some specific things startups can do to kind of stay ahead of the game?
Well, one thing is to really embrace technology. I mean, technology is constantly changing, and those who are who are slow to adapt, they often find themselves, they find themselves falling behind.
Right. So it's not just about using technology, it's about using it strategically and keeping up with those advancements.
Right. And you might need to, you might need to adapt your business model. You might need to diversify your product offerings. You might need to adjust your pricing.
So having that agility to pivot and adapt.
Exactly. And remember diversification. If you rely too much on one product or one market, it makes you vulnerable.
Right. If that one thing goes away, then your whole business is in trouble.
Exactly. And then finally, and I can't emphasize this enough, commit to continuous learning.
Yeah. Always be learning. But how does that translate to future-proofing your business?
Well, the business world is constantly changing. New technologies, new competitors, new regulations. You have to be constantly learning, adapting, and evolving your knowledge to stay ahead of the game.
It's like adopting that growth mindset.
Exactly. Now, I want to share a real-world example of a startup that successfully pivoted their business model in response to a big change.
Ooh, a story time. Tell me more.
So this travel app, they were focused on booking, international flights, accommodations. They were doing pretty well. And then the pandemic hit.
Right. Talk about a curveball.
It was. But instead of panicking, they took a step back and they looked at the situation, and they realized that while people still wanted to travel, their priorities had changed.
Right. Safety and flexibility became much more important.
Exactly. And so they quickly pivoted their platform to focus more on those local experiences, those road trips.
Yeah.
Yeah. Catering to that increasing demand for staycations.
They adapted to the needs of their customers.
They did, and it was a success. They not only survived the pandemic, they thrived. And it just shows the power of adaptability and really understanding your market.
That's a great story. It shows that even in a crisis, if you have the right attitude and a bit of creativity, you can not only survive, but you can actually come out stronger on the other side.
Right. And it really underscores the importance of having a strong financial base. Which brings us back to the MMM model.
Yeah, having that financial discipline and those healthy profit margins, it gives you that flexibility, it gives you that cushion to be able to adapt when those unexpected challenges come your way.
Exactly. Now, as your startup grows and changes, you might need to make some adjustments to that MMM model.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. But how do you go about doing that? It seems like it could get complicated.
It doesn't have to be. The MMM model is all about flexibility. It's designed to grow with your business. The key is to regularly evaluate your financial health and then just make adjustments as needed. How often do you think you should be doing that?
Well, considering how quickly things change, I would say at least quarterly. Or maybe even monthly when you're first starting out.
I agree. And during those assessments, take a look at your revenue streams. Are they still performing well? Are there new opportunities out there?
So it's about identifying those potential areas of growth.
Exactly. And you also want to be looking at your cost structure. Are there any places where you could improve efficiency?
So constantly looking for ways to do things better.
Exactly. And don't forget about the power of technology. There's so many financial management tools out there that can really help you track your cash flow, forecast your finances, and even simulate the impact of different business decisions.
Right, like those tools we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Technology can be a real game changer. Now, another key thing to remember is that as your business grows, you might need to make some changes to your overall revenue and cost structures.
Right. So what works in the early days may not be sustainable as you start to scale.
Exactly. You might need to invest more in marketing. You might need to expand your team. But the MMM model, it gives you a framework for making those adjustments while still prioritizing profitability and financial stability.
That's like having a roadmap for navigating those changes.
Exactly. I want to give you an example of this in action.
Okay, sure.
So imagine you've got this tech startup, and initially they're just selling, a single software product. But as they grow, they realize that their customers need a wider range of tools and services.
Okay. So they're seeing an opportunity to expand their offerings.
They are. And so they decide to develop some complementary products, and they introduce a subscription-based pricing model. And this is a big shift for them.
Right. It's not just adding new products. They have to kind of rethink their whole financial approach.
Right. And so they reassessed their cost structure. They identified areas where they could cut back, maybe on certain development costs. And this freed up some resources so they could focus on acquiring new customers and retaining those existing customers.
So shifting those priorities to align with that new business model.
Exactly. And by doing that, by adapting their MMM model, they're able to maintain their profitability while also successfully expanding their reach.
That's a great example of how MMM is not, it's not the static thing. It's something that's dynamic, and it can be tailored to really support a business's growth.
Exactly. Now, beyond just adapting your MMM model, there are some broader strategies that you can use to really ensure sustainable financial management as your startup grows.
Okay. What are those?
Well, it starts with financial agility. Yeah. And that means being able to respond quickly to changes, changes in the market, changes in your industry, and doing that without putting your financial health at risk.
So being proactive and adaptable instead of reactive.
Exactly. And another really important strategy is something called adaptive budgeting.
Adaptive budgeting. I've never heard of that one. What's that all about?
So this is a much more dynamic approach to budgeting. It allows you to adjust your spending plans as your business evolves.
So it's not about setting a rigid budget at the beginning of the year and then sticking to it no matter what.
Right. It's about being flexible, being responsive, making sure that your budget is a living document.
Okay.
And then another really, really important strategy is to cultivate a data-driven culture.
Data is king these days.
It is. And so this is about encouraging everyone in your startup to make decisions based on data and insights, not just on gut feelings.
So using data to really optimize your financial strategies.
Exactly. Now, going beyond that, another key strategy for sustainable growth is focusing on customer lifetime value.
Customer lifetime value, CLV. Yeah. That's all about maximizing the revenue that you get from each customer, right?
That's it. And this is so crucial for lean startups because it shifts the focus from just acquiring new customers to really nurturing the relationships with those customers you already have.
And why is that so important for sustainable growth?
Because it's usually much more cost-effective to keep those existing customers happy than to constantly be, chasing new ones. Happy customers are more likely to come back. They're more likely to recommend your business to others.
So it's a win-win. You're creating a positive customer experience, and
it benefits your bottom line in the long run.
Makes sense.
Now, as your startup scales, the financial side of things, it gets more complex too, right?
It does. More transactions, more people involved, possibly more regulations to navigate.
Exactly. So another important strategy is to really invest in financial education and expertise.
So constantly learning and improving your financial knowledge. Do you think it's necessary to hire a full-time CFO right away?
Not necessarily. There are other options. You can consult with a part-time CFO. You can attend workshops. There are online courses. There are even mentorship programs out there.
Right. Finding those resources that fit your budget and your stage of growth. Are there any other strategies we should be thinking about here?
Well, we talked about it before, but technology can be a real game changer.
Okay, remind me how technology can help in this area.
Yep. Well, automating those financial processes, things like invoicing, payroll, that can save you a lot of time and reduce errors. And then you have those cloud-based tools that can give you real-time insights into your business performance. And then there's predictive analytics, which can help you anticipate future trends.
So technology can streamline things, provide insights, and even help us kind of predict the future a little bit.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool. And then finally, for sustainable growth, it's really important to foster those strong relationships with your financial stakeholders.
By stakeholders, you mean investors, lenders, advisors, people like that.
Yes. And it's so important to communicate with them proactively and transparently. Keep them informed about your progress, your financial performance, your plans for the future.
So it's about building those relationships based on trust and open communication.
Exactly, because those strong relationships, they can lead to, valuable advice, mentorship, and even access to additional funding. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the common financial challenges that lean startups often face.
It's good. Every startup runs into some bumps along the way. So what are some of those common financial roadblocks, and how do we avoid them?
Well, one of the most common pitfalls is misjudging those startup costs. A lot of entrepreneurs underestimate how much it really costs to launch a business, and that can lead to, cash flow problems early on.
Right. It's easy to forget about those hidden costs, those unexpected expenses that pop up.
Exactly. So it's really important to do a very thorough cost analysis before you launch.
So doing your homework.
Right. Outline all of those potential expenses and always build in a contingency buffer for those unexpected costs.
Kind of a financial safety net.
Yeah, exactly.
There.
Now, another common challenge, and this one could really make or break a startup, is neglecting to monitor cash flow effectively.
Cash flow, that's the lifeblood of any business.
It is. And so, a healthy cash flow means that you have enough money coming in to pay your bills, to invest in growth.
Right, because even if a business is profitable on paper, if they don't have the actual cash on hand to cover expenses, that's a problem.
Exactly. So one of the keys here is to implement regular cash flow assessments.
Okay. How often should we be checking our cash flow?
I would say weekly.
Yeah.
Especially in those early stages.
Okay.
Use a spreadsheet or a financial management tool to really keep track of the money coming in, the money going out, and try to forecast your cash flow.
So being proactive,
Mm-hmm.
spotting those potential cash flow gaps before they become a big problem.
Exactly. Now, what if you do identify a potential shortfall? What are some things you can do?
Well, you could try to speed up those accounts receivables. Maybe offer customers a small discount for paying their invoices early.
That's a great idea. You could also negotiate with your suppliers to get better payment terms. And then there's also things like, invoice financing or a line of credit.
Right. Short-term solutions that can kind of help you bridge that gap. We talked a bit about the dangers of relying too much on a single revenue stream.
Right. If you're too dependent on, one product, one customer, one market, it makes you really vulnerable.
Right. If something happens to disrupt that one source of income, then your whole business could be in trouble.
Exactly. So diversifying those income sources is really important.
But diversification can be tough, especially for a lean startup that's already stretched thin. So what are some practical ways to diversify without spreading yourself too thin?
Well, start by looking at your existing offerings. Could you create different pricing tiers? Could you offer additional services?
So finding ways to kind of build on what you already have.
Right. And don't be afraid to explore new markets or even look for partnerships that can help you open up new revenue streams.
Okay. Another challenge that a lot of startups face, and this one can be a little bit uncomfortable to talk about, is underpricing their products or services.
It's more common than you might think. A lot of entrepreneurs, especially those who are really passionate about what they do, they tend to undervalue their work.
I get it. It's easy to get so excited about sharing your creation with the world that you kind of forget about the financial side of things.
Right. And underpricing can lead to, all sorts of problems. Unsustainable profit margins, trouble scaling, and even burnout.
Okay. So how do we avoid that? How do we make sure we're pricing things correctly?
Market research is really key. Understand your target audience, what they're willing to pay, what they value. Don't just look at what your competitors are doing. Focus on the unique value that you offer.
Right. So knowing your worth.
Exactly. And it's also really important to track your costs. You need to know exactly how much it costs to produce that product or to deliver that service so you can make sure that your prices are covering those costs and leaving you with a profit margin.
If you're not making a profit, you're not in business. Another thing that a lot of startups tend to overlook, especially early on, is tax planning.
Taxes, not the most exciting topic.
It's really, but it's important.
It is, and neglecting it can really come back to bite you.
So what are some things startups can do to kind of stay on top of their taxes?
Well, I would say the most important thing is to get professional help. Hire a tax professional who can really guide you through those tax implications.
So getting expert advice. Making sure you're following all the rules and taking advantage of any deductions or credits that might be available.
Exactly. And then it's also really important to have a system for tracking your income and your expenses.
So good record keeping is crucial.
It is. And then I also recommend setting aside a portion of your revenue each month specifically for taxes.
So creating a separate savings account just for your tax obligations.
Exactly. That way you're not scrambling when tax season rolls around. Another challenge that a lot of startups face, especially if the founders aren't financially inclined, is inadequate financial analysis and forecasting.
Yeah. It's easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day operations that you kind of forget to step back and look at the bigger financial picture.
Right. They're so focused on building that product, marketing those services that they kind of lose sight of the overall financial health of the business.
And that can be a costly mistake. It's like trying to navigate without a map or a compass.
That's a great analogy. So how can startups avoid this and really make sure they're making those smart, data-driven decisions?
Well, I think the first step is to implement regular financial checkups, maybe monthly or even weekly in the early stages.
Okay.
And then use those checkups to really analyze those key metrics. Your revenue, your expenses, your profit margins, your cash flow.
Really understanding what those numbers are telling you.
Right. And once you have a good handle on your current financial position, then you can start to forecast.
Right. Forecasting.
Forecasting can be a little intimidating. Do you have to be a financial whiz to do it effectively?
Not at all. There are lots of tools and resources available. You can use spreadsheets, financial modeling software. There are even online calculators that can help you.
So technology can help us here as well.
Absolutely. And the key is to create realistic financial projections. Factor in historical data, current market conditions, your own growth goals.
So creating a roadmap for your financial future.
Right. But remember, financial forecasting is not about, perfectly predicting the future.
Nobody can predict the future.
Right. It's about creating different scenarios, exploring those possibilities, and then having plans in place for different outcomes.
So being prepared for whatever comes your way.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about a lot of challenges, a lot of solutions, but sometimes it can be really helpful to hear those real life stories of how startups have overcome those financial obstacles.
I agree. A good story can be really inspiring. So tell me about a startup that triumphed over adversity.
So imagine this tech startup. They've got this great product idea, really ambitious founders, but they're bootstrapping.
So they're resourceful, but they don't have a lot of funding.
Right. And early on, they realized that they couldn't afford to invest in all that expensive, cutting-edge software that they needed. So what did they do?
Maybe they looked for open source alternatives.
Exactly. They embraced those open source solutions, which can be just as good as the paid options.
Smart move.
Yeah.
That would save them a lot of money. But wasn't there a learning curve involved in using that open source software?
There was, but this startup, they saw it as an opportunity. They encouraged their team to learn those new tools, and they even started contributing to the open source community.
So they turned a financial constraint into a learning experience for their team.
Exactly, and it paid off. They saved money, and they actually created this really strong culture of innovation within their startup.
Love it. Do you have another story for us?
Sure. Let's talk about this the sustainable fashion startup. They were really committed to using eco-friendly materials and ethical production practices, but they were having trouble scaling their manufacturing because of the higher costs involved.
Yeah, that's a common challenge for businesses that are trying to do things the right way.
It is. But this startup, they got creative. They turned to their community for help. They launched a crowdfunding campaign, and they were really transparent about their story, about their mission, about the challenges they were facing.
So they tapped into the power of crowdfunding.
Right, and it worked. They raised enough money to expand their production while still staying true to their values.
That's a great example of how transparency and authenticity can really, really pay off. Do you have another one? Another story?
Okay, this one is all about making a strategic shift. So this startup, they were initially offering consulting services.
Okay.
And they were doing okay, but the market was really competitive and they were having a hard time standing out.
Right. It's tough to break through in the consulting world.
It is.
Yeah.
But this startup, they had a secret weapon. They had this unique data analysis process that they had developed, and they realized that they could turn this process into a software solution.
So they saw the potential to package their expertise into a product that they could scale.
Right. And it was a risk because they had to pause their consulting revenue to focus on building this software.
Right. So they had to kind of take that leap of faith.
They did. And it paid off. The software took off, and they were able to scale their business much faster and more profitably than they could have with just the consulting.
That's a great example of how pivoting your business model, even though it can be, a little bit scary, can lead to bigger and better things. Do you have one more?
Sure. This one is all about the power of bootstrapping.
Sure.
So this startup, they had this vision for a digital marketing platform, but they couldn't get funding from investors.
So they had a great idea, but they didn't have the money to get it off the ground.
Right. But they were determined, and they decided to bootstrap. So they focused on getting those first few clients, and then they just reinvested all of their profits back into the business.
So they started small, they grew organically,
right,
and they maintained full ownership of their company.
Exactly. And through careful financial management, through great customer service, they were able to become profitable without having to give up any equity.
That's really inspiring. It shows that bootstrapping can be a viable path to success.
It can. And those are just a few examples of startups that have successfully overcome those common financial hurdles. And their stories show the importance of creativity, resilience, adaptability. And as we wrap up this exploration of minimalist money management, I think it's really important to emphasize those qualities of patience, persistence, and continuous learning.
Right. Those are essential for any entrepreneur, but especially for those who are embracing MMM. So why are those qualities so important in this context?
Well, minimalist money management is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a long-term commitment. And so you need that patience to resist the temptation to overspend or to chase those shiny objects.
And building a successful business takes time.
It does. And you need that persistence because you will run into obstacles, you will face setbacks.
Right.
But it's about sticking to those M&M principles, learning from your mistakes, and just continuing to move forward.
Staying focused, staying disciplined.
Exactly. And then that continuous learning, it's so important because the business world is constantly changing.
Right.
New technologies emerge, customer expectations evolve. You have to constantly be learning, adapting, evolving to stay ahead.
It's all about having that growth mindset.
It is. And as we wrap up here, I just want to encourage all those entrepreneurs, all those lean startup founders out there.
Please do. We could all use a little inspiration.
Embrace those uncertainties. Embrace the excitement. Embrace the challenges. Embrace those moments of doubt. Embrace the triumphs. But most importantly, embrace the journey.
Embrace the journey.
Right. Minimalist money management, it's not about limitations. It's about freedom. It's about having the financial flexibility to pursue those passions, to innovate, to grow, to make a difference.
It's about finding that balance between profit and purpose.
Exactly. And so, go out there, build something amazing, and do it with financial prudence. Build a business that really reflects your vision.
Great advice. I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close.
It has been a truly insightful exploration.
It really has.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've learned a lot and that you feel empowered to really take control of your financial future. Minimalist money management, it's more than just a financial strategy. It's a mindset. It's a way of building a business that's not just profitable, but it's also sustainable.
It has been a pleasure.
Before we sign off, I thought it might be helpful to kind of summarize everything we've talked about, distill it down into some key takeaways for our listeners.
A fantastic idea.
So let's see if we can come up with, say, 10 key points.
Okay. I think we can do that. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway?
Well, I think it all starts with that flipped profit equation: sales profit, expenses. It's such a simple but powerful change in perspective.
Right. It puts profit front and center. Okay, so that's number 1 on our list.
Okay. Number 2, and this is closely related to the first point. It's about setting up those separate bank accounts. One for revenue, one for profit, one for operating expenses, and one for owner's compensation.
Right. It's all about giving every dollar a job.
Love it. Okay, number 3, and this is something we talked about quite a bit, is the value versus cost assessment.
Right. Looking at the value that each expense brings to your business, not just the price.
Exactly. Okay, number 4, and this is so important for product development. Design those products and services with profitability in mind from the very beginning.
Don't wait until the end to think about those profit margins.
Okay. Number 5, and we saw some great examples of this. It's the power of identifying and cultivating multiple revenue streams.
Right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify, diversify, diversify.
Okay, number 6, and this one can be tricky. Optimizing your pricing strategy.
Right. Finding that sweet spot that reflects the value you offer while still being, attractive to your target market.
Okay. Number 7, we talked a lot about this. Building that lean financial culture within your startup.
Right. Transparency, communication, financial literacy.
Right. Building that culture where everyone is on the same page financially.
Okay. Number 8, scaling with minimalist finances.
Don't overspend in the pursuit of growth.
Focus on those core competencies. Maintain that financial simplicity.
Number 9, future-proofing your startup.
Right. Be adaptable. Embrace technology. Never stop learning.
And number 10, and I think this is a good one to end on, it's about adapting your MMM model as your business needs change.
What worked in the beginning might not work later on.
So it's about constantly reviewing those strategies and making adjustments as needed.
And staying true to those core principles of financial discipline.
Well said. I think those 10 points give our listeners a really good overview of minimalist money management and how they can use it to really build a successful business.
I agree.
All right, that is it for this episode of the Deep Dive. We covered a lot today, but we hope you found it valuable and that you've got some practical strategies that you can start implementing.
Remember, minimalist money management is not about restrictions. It's about freedom. It's about having the resources to do what you love, to innovate, to grow.
And to build a business that really reflects your vision. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, happy diving.
All right. So before we wrap up this deep dive into minimalist money management, I think it would be helpful to kind of recap all the key points we've covered. It's been a lot of information.
Oh, for sure. Condensing it all into a few takeaways can really help,
Yeah.
Make those lessons stick. Exactly. It's like a cheat sheet for financial success. So let's see if we can boil it down to maybe 10 key takeaways. What stands out to you as like the most important thing we've discussed?
That's a good question. I think it all starts with that flipped profit equation, right? Sales, profit, expenses. It might seem small, but it's a big change in how you think about your business finances.
I agree. It's putting profit first. It's making sure that profit is not an afterthought. So that's number 1 on our list. What about number 2?
Number 2, I think it's got to be those separate bank accounts, revenue, profit, operating expenses, and owner's compensation.
Oh, absolutely. Having those designated accounts really helps.
Yeah.
It helps you stay organized, and it makes it harder to kind of stray from your MMM allocations.
Right. Every dollar has a job.
Okay, so number 3 on our list, the value versus cost assessment.
That's all about making sure that every dollar you spend is actually bringing value to your business.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just about being cheap. It's about being strategic.
Exactly. Okay, number 4, designing your products and services with profitability in mind from the very beginning.
Right. Don't wait until the end to figure out if you're actually making money.
Make it part of the process from day one.
Okay. Number 5, multiple revenue streams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Diversify your income. Don't rely on just one thing.
Right. Spread that risk.
Exactly.
Okay. Number 6, And this one I think is one of the trickier ones. Pricing.
Finding that right price that reflects your value, but also, is something that your customers are willing to pay.
Right. It's a balance.
It is.
Okay. Number 7, building a lean financial culture.
Transparency, communication, getting everyone on the same page.
Exactly.
Number 8, scaling.
Scaling with minimalist finances. Don't overspend just because you're seeing some growth.
Right. Focus on those core strengths. Keep things simple.
Okay. Number 9, future-proofing.
The world is changing fast, so you got to be ready to adapt.
Right. Stay informed, be flexible, keep learning.
Exactly. And number 10, and I think this is a really good one to wrap up with.
Yeah.
Remember that your MMM model is not set in stone. It's going to change as your business changes.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
No. You're going to have to make adjustments along the way.
I think that's a great list of takeaways. It's a really good summary of everything we've talked about today.
I agree.
So to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it valuable. We hope you learned a lot. And remember, minimalist money management is not about limitations. It's about giving you that freedom to build the business that you really want to build.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks again for listening. And until next time, happy diving.